As Gavin walked into the dusty living room, he suddenly felt a need to adjust his tie. Whether it be due to the looming sense of anxiety that crept over him, or flashbacks to the past attacking his brain, he wasn't sure. All he knew was that this room, this house, brought unpleasant feelings along with it. And those feelings harboured similarly unpleasant memories. But Gavin did not show it on his face, for he was not alone.
It's always sad to say goodbye to a home so big as this,
his father's voice remarked. Gavin found it difficult to speak to his father. Struggling to find the words to say to him, he instead spoke as if he was talking to himself.
Yeah, it's large. Your mum did a good job of making it feel properly lived in,
he said with spite thinly veiled. It was as he said this that Gavin realised what the unpleasant feeling was. Longing. Longing for the house that was once his home, to be just the way it was back when he was living there as a child. Gavin felt his eyes scanning the room for some semblance of recognisability, some trickle of nostalgia. He found very little, and what he did sent a chill down his spine.
Felt bigger as a kid, though.
He struggled to get the words out.
A house is something that fills a hole in your heart, a place dedicated entirely to feelings and memories. But once that space becomes empty, that's when you realise how big a house really is,
his father echoed.
Yeah, I feel that space like a gaping wound in my chest. I don't think I'd become so emotional over a place that, frankly, is in dire need of repair. The creaky floorboards, the groans of the door hinges, the weird damp spot in the corner. It's certainly been used. I see you even kept the chairs that were never comfortable no matter how hard you tried. I'll be honest, it all sucks. It's horrible. There are so many better places that could have been lived in. Places which are probably abandoned or given to owners who mistreat them. Places large and comfortable where you could just sit down together as a family, quietly, and just take in the atmosphere. Maybe a crackling fireplace that's on all the time because the house is so large it gets cold. But while you're in it, no matter how cold it gets, you always feel warm. But instead, I grew up here in this place. This cacophony of dust and knickknacks and memories which I'd rather not remember, but always seem to when I enter. This house is cold. It's always cold. You've changed a lot about it. Try to fix the broken parts the best you can, but that still remains. Whenever I think back to a memory in this house, one thought always crops up. Like, literally, no matter how good, or in most cases how bad a memory is, the thing I always find myself getting unnecessarily fixated on is how cold it is.
Gavin ran his fingers along the side of the door, feeling its bumps and splinters, its wear and tear from age. It should have been removed a long time ago.
Because this house did have its blips of good. All my early memories, actually, I remember how warm this place used to feel. It felt comfy back then, more alive, more content with itself, you know? Still finding its footing, its place in our hearts. It felt like it tried. But of course, that was back before the subtle cracks in the ceiling started to grow, which let water drip slowly down to the ground, creating a damp spot. A crack we could have easily repaired, but never seemed to find the time to. And that crack grew and grew until it became a gorge that separated us. Separated itself. A line drawn between being a house and being a home. I think after that is when I began to notice how the cold air lingered. And so now all I can remember is how cold it was. How cold it is. All the time. And I think it feels even colder today. That's why I left this place. I had to.
Gavin walked deeper into the depths of the room, eyeing an old, decrepit couch in the corner. A tidal wave of memories washed over him.
I had my first kiss on this couch, you know. Stacy from school. She came round to help me with my homework the day after Mr. Morrison yelled at me in the middle of class for not doing the work, even though I had a fair excuse of dealing with ones.
Gavin bit his lip. His grief grew on him like an infestation. He took a deep breath and continued speaking in the same melancholic tone, his eyes vacant and sore from the tears. He adjusted his tie once more.
So, I saw her after class, and we got to talking about nothing in particular, and I just kind of wove the conversation about work and class and the point of it all. Without even thinking about it, I invited her around to help me with work. That was a good night. It was awkward and strange having more than 2 people in the house again, but once I realized that she wasn't able to fill the hole that was left behind, I was able to move past that. And then one thing led to another, and we got to talking, watched a movie, and in the darkness, the only thing lighting her beautiful face, the moonlight. And then it happened. And it should have been one of the best moments of my life. And yet all I could be preoccupied with was how the chair's lumps and dips hurt, how the howling of the wind was deafening, and how cold it was. I think that was the first time I realized that the icy air wouldn't be going away.
Gavin wandered into the centre of the room. He could feel the eyes of the house looking down upon him. He felt weighted down by its omnipotence.
I remember we used to have a carpet here. It was a raggedy old thing, so I don't blame you for getting rid of it.
In truth, he did. He resented his father greatly enough already. For some reason, he felt this carpet was the icing on the cake, the straw that broke the camel's back, the small but unforgivable act.
I remember Mum bought it when I was younger. Apparently got it cheap from a friend. I kept slipping on the floor, so she thought a carpet would stop the problem. And it did. But that just created more problems. The carpet got old and worn out, and over time it began to break down, strands of it falling out and finding their ways throughout the house. It wasn't noticeable at first, but by the time we realized how bad it got, well, it was too late to do anything about it. So we simply just left it, watched it, slowly breaking away, tiptoeing around it, acting as if it wasn't even there. And now, it's just gone. And I don't even remember much of it, other than the fact that it was once here, and then before I realized it, it wasn't.
Gavin found himself searching for more memories within the room. He struggled. And despite his dislike of being thrust into the past suddenly, he felt frustrated that these memories had been thrown away or moved without a care in the world. He looked up to the mantelpiece, where a small elephant used to once sit. It was his mother's favourite. She'd gotten it from her mother, and her mother had got it for her as a birthday gift. It was a piece of history that sat plainly. Gavin's mother originally saw it as a relic of the past, and as a young woman did not care much for the amount of sentimental value that was placed into it. To her, it made the piece feel heavy with hopes, dreams, and grief. A swirling of emotions that would cause her to sink when she grabbed a hold of it. It was the anchor which brought her back into the past, into the deterioration of her mother and her grandmother. She drowned in that sorrow. Yet, still, as she got older, she found that having an object like this was a good reminder of her mortality. And so when Gavin, as a young boy, broke the elephant, even though she had punished him for breaking something so important to her life, she was secretly glad that it was finally gone. Gavin, however, did not know this fact, nor the history behind the elephant. All he knew was that the object was important to his mother, and that as a child he took something from her that he'd never be able to give back. And that was a guilt that weighed him down his entire life. If he still had it, perhaps he would have some connection left to his mother, so he thought. But unfortunately, despite whatever other objects he kept, he still never got over that incident. Looking at the shelf brought back this regret tenfold.
I'm sorry, Dad, but this isn't my home anymore. There's something missing from it. Something that's been missing for a while. I thought coming back here I might have found what I had lost, but I find it's more empty than ever. Things have changed, and I know how hard you tried to keep everything the same for all these years, but there's just some things you can't control. Time, and the destruction it brings along with it, being one.
Gavin took in a deep breath. The room stayed still. All but the ticking of the clock in the distance made noise, the pause between each tick seemingly endless, but also frighteningly short. Gavin took a step deeper into the room. He could feel it beckoning him to return to its cold embrace. The floorboards groaned and creaked as he slowly took a hesitant step forward.
Of course I understand,
remarked his father's voice, breaking through the cold silence. Whether he said it out loud or it was another memory, Gavin couldn't tell.
I used to think the same, you know. I remember when I was younger, I worked at this American-themed diner. I worked there for as many hours as I could because I needed the satisfaction of doing something with my life. But I spent so long running from being normal that running became my new normal. I became stuck in perpetual fear that no matter how hard I would run, I wouldn't ever be able to escape my life. It dragged me down like quicksand. But one day, all that changed. On a warm spring day, the most beautiful lady walked in, and she changed my entire world. We chatted slightly. She'd just gotten out of her job early because she managed to convince some poor new sap in the office to do her work for her. She always had a way of controlling everything so that it'd go exactly the way she'd want it to. She had a leash on life, and that leash she tied round me too. Her eyes locked onto me and said, "You're mine." And with that declaration, I was. I suppose for the first time in my life, I was pretty happy to give up control. We did all sorts of things together. We grew together, we separated, and we connected. And one day we found this house, our home. And this home is where we built our life. I didn't like it when we first moved in, but I stayed for her, fixed it for her, did everything for her. And I was content with that. But eventually our house was hit with storms uncontrollable by even her, and slowly but surely the house and the dream associated with it came crashing down. After that, I had nothing to live for. Trying to pull myself out only made me sink deeper into despair. Stricken with grief, I had no reason, no motivation to stay trapped in these walls, but I realized that I didn't want to leave this place. No matter how bad it got, I wouldn't abandon it. I couldn't. Because even as things changed around me, even if she left me, this would still be our home. That was the promise we made to this house. I'd grown content here. That's something I never thought I'd think. I'd spent so long running, resisting change, that I never enjoyed the moments I had. It took a lot for me to realize that, but I think I'll finally try to enjoy the present than regret the past or resent the future.
The room stood still. Gavin, having replayed this conversation within his mind, like it was stuck on loop, knew what his father would say next. He feared these words greatly, for this was where it all ended.
Ever heard of the ship of Theseus?
Gavin's father remarked as Gavin was packing his bags and throwing them into the car. There was a slight feeling of desperation within his voice, as though the words he were about to say were a warning rehearsed many times before.
I don't know all the details, but from what I understand, if you take a ship apart, bit by bit, piece by piece, over the course of many years until nothing but the memories of what once was remains, the question can be asked, is that the same ship as when it was first made? The way I see it, if you spent your life with that ship and never set foot off it, even as it was moved and altered around you, that's still your ship. It may change, it may break apart in storms, but if you keep your feet down on it and never let go, then you'd have made the ground you stand on your own. A house is like that, constantly changing, slowly. A house is something that fills a hole in your heart, a place dedicated entirely to feelings and memories. But once that space becomes empty, that's when you realize how big a house really is. But also, that's when you realize how that house has become your home. I understand the fear that staying stagnant brings, and all too well, I understand the pain of losing the past. It's always sad to say goodbye to a home so big as this.
But that's the problem, Dad. I can't be weighed down with things only changing at a sluggish pace. I spend most of my life doing nothing, just watching the walls slowly change around me. I can't take it anymore.
But the truth is, and was back then, that Gavin was jealous of his father. Gavin wanted so badly to be able to enjoy the simplicity in being complacent in the way that he was. He too wanted to be content with living within the moment, but the fear held him back.
Things change, whether you want them to or not. But some things stay. The things you keep in your heart remain, no matter how the world alters before your very eyes. Your home will always live in your heart. It's good to change, but it's also good to stay in the moment for as long as you can.
Gavin bit his tongue as he realised where he'd heard these words before. Words he had forgotten. Feelings he had chosen to ignore. Memories he locked away within this house. And like a Pandora's box, all of these demons attacked his mind as soon as he unlocked the barrier and set foot unto its premises. With regret, the memory continued.
But it doesn't always move forwards, does it? Because someday I'll look up at the walls, and they'll be the same walls I looked at from the day before, and the day before that, and the day before that, and the day before that. And the thing is, I want so badly to just be able to enjoy that. Just like back then, when the walls were solid, and I could enjoy my youth like it was endless. Like I was free. Free to spend my time just basking in the moment. Letting the warmth of where I was, no matter how old or broken the world around me was, I could just let it envelop me. But time's not endless, is it, Dad? Eventually, it just ends. And staring at those walls, reminds me that I can't be content of living the regret of Mum's death. Not like you. Sorry. That was uncalled for.
Gavin winced with pain as he recalled the great anguish within his voice, the cruelty with which he picked up his bags and walked out of the room, walked out of the house, and walked out of his father's life. But the most painful part of that memory was the look on his father's face. Not sadness, nor regret, but empathy and understanding of Gavin's struggle. And for the longest time, that face infuriated Gavin. Until now, when it made tears begin to stream down his face, leaving a mark on the floorboards. A cold air placed its hand on Gavin's shoulder. It felt heavy, but that might too have all been in his head. It's time to set sail and choose where you place your home.
Where you place your home. It's scary and hard, but you're not alone. When you leave, your house goes with you. And your house is strong, it's reliable, built upon stone, brick by brick, each layer crafted by you. This is just another brick to add to the pile. You can pull apart your house and build it back up again. The house you craft for yourself, the space to store memories and feelings, is within you, wherever you are,
even if the world around you changes. Gavin felt a feeling of guilt for putting words into his father's mouth. It was not for him to decide his father's intentions for staying stagnant. In truth, he knew he could never understand the true intentions of that man. But he tried his best to decipher the meaning behind the look on his father's face from that day, and to understand the actions his father had taken every day before then, too. But through this internal monologue, he began to understand that it is not for him to judge the house his father had built for himself. He was a guest within this house, a house he, too, was lucky enough to call home. And perhaps the foundations of this house were fragile and flawed, but Gavin understood that nonetheless they were the foundations which built him up to become the person he is today. And that this house and its cold memories, its cold regrets, will follow him. But perhaps that's not such a bad thing, for that will inspire the person whom he chooses to become in the future. And with that, with no more words to be said, Gavin's personal eulogy ended. He packed away the things he was given, and he turned and walked out. As he walked out, he could have sworn that the cold air enveloped him once more, but this time he felt warm. Sure of his future destination, but he knew wherever it may be, it would be home.